Morning to everybody coming in. We'll get started in just a moment.
Good morning to you.
Morning.
Good morning.
I love that. Juniata, the whole admissions office has joined. Good morning, Juniata. And good morning to my staff. I see Gettysburg College has joined as well. Just as soon as we make sure we have everyone from the waiting room, we will go ahead and get started. And thanks to everyone who has unmuted their video. It's nice to see a lot of smiling faces this early on a Monday morning.
Share.
All right. Well, as folks are still coming in, I think we can go ahead and get started to keep ourselves on time as we have quite the full schedule over these next few days, next 2 days. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Mary Smith. I'm one of the Senior Associate Directors at the Admissions Office at Gettysburg College, and I am proud to be the president of PACAC, your Pennsylvania Association for College Admission Counseling. It has been quite the year. Welcome to our 57th annual PACAC conference and our first ever virtual conference. A lot has happened since we last met in Hershey. Who could have predicted, who could have planned what would happen in this past year? This horrible pandemic that has created so much havoc and uncertainty in our work, our lives, and obviously in the lives of our students and families that we serve. I hope these 2 days will bring some refreshment, even though we perhaps are a little tired of Zoom, but also some energy and some new information and helpful information in the work that we do with students and families. A huge shout out and thank you to Taylor Miller from St. Joe's, who has been our conference chair extraordinaire and has been able to make that wonderful pivot to this virtual setting. And thank you to the whole conference planning team who has done a lot of work to get us here. Special thanks also goes out to our virtual host, Bill Tetz, Andy O'Donnell, who's behind the scenes running everything, and to the co-founder, Ramit Varma, who actually has joined us in this conversation and is going to do a short welcome. So I will turn it over momentarily to Ramit. Good morning, Ramit.
Morning, how are you?
Great. Is it 6 a.m. by you? Is that about right?
6 a.m. Yeah, lovely. It's foggy this morning. It's unusual for LA, but I'm an early riser, so it's all good. Thanks for the shout out and the intro. I thought I'll just take a minute or two to tell you all a little bit about Revolution Prep. We started Revolution Prep about almost 18 years ago now, and we initially started because I had worked for the Princeton Review. My business partner Jake had worked for had worked for Kaplan, and we really had a perspective on learning, and I think the best way to do learning. At Princeton Review, we had a strategy around reading comprehension, which was not to read the passages. And so I think that the idea of teaching students in a way that really is focused on their core skills is something that's been really, really important to us. About 10 years ago, we started doing online learning, and we started doing instruction via, at the time it was WebEx. We used Adobe Connect, and in the last 5 years or so, we've been using Zoom. And we found a lot of really big benefits, actually, of doing online instruction. And so I think that's something that, now in this world, people have been sort of thrown into the deep end of online instruction. And, when you're just sort of taking what you've done in person and trying to put it online, that can be a really big challenge. I think a big challenge for a lot of folks. And so something that we're happy to provide anyone with is an opportunity to learn. We're sharing. We do professional development. We do a lot of stuff to help people learn how to do online instruction. There's a lot of benefits of doing online instruction. And the last thing I'd like to share with you all is in particularly in this cultural moment, we've always had a very, very strong social mission. We've never turned away a student who's unable to afford our programs, and we have a very deep commitment to equity and access. So if those of you who are working in high schools, you're working even in colleges, if there are things that we can do to be a part of the solution, we really would ask that you reach out to us. If you have students that are unable to afford tutoring services or supplemental education services of various kinds, we actually have a business model which allows us to help support those students. And so, Bill Tetz, who Mary mentioned, is on the call. He'll be reaching out to, I think, many of you all. And we just want to sort of put it out there that we, are deeply committed to doing what we can in the short, medium, and long term to help right some of the wrongs that have been made. So. That's it. I won't take up much more of your all's time. I really do appreciate the platform, and I hope you enjoy the virtual conference. The ones we've run have been really, really successful.
Thank you, Ramit. Huge thanks to your whole team. They have been incredible in helping us to plan and prepare for all of this conference. And so first and foremost, if Taylor will split to our next slide. On our next slide, we have them listed first and foremost under our platinum sponsors. Huge thanks to Revolution Prep and to all of our sponsors who have sponsored this conference: College Board, Marca, Portage Learning, Scarlet Computing Solutions, all under that platinum sponsorship level, and our gold sponsors: Carnegie Dartlet, Citizens Bank, College Ave Students Loans, Sallie Mae, the Princeton Review, and XAP. And from here, I will turn it over to Taylor, who will introduce our opening speaker, but also give us some housekeeping items for this virtual event. Welcome again to all of you. It is great to see you virtually, and I will see you through the rest of the conference.
Good morning, everyone. We are finally here. The 57th annual conference is not entirely what we expected, but a huge shout out to the conference planning committee, to Mary Smith, to Ryan Gillen, to my past president advisor, Chuck Bachman, Andrea. Oh my gosh, Andrea, you're the best. I don't know what we would do without you. I have such a phenomenal team in the conference planning committee, so you are all the best. I couldn't have expected a better team this year. And I really hope that all of your smiling faces, every attendee here, gets something out of this virtual conference. This is hopefully a way to, even though we're trying to avoid Zoom fatigue, to rejuvenate, to connect, to try to get an idea. As everyone asks, what's happening this fall? We don't know. Maybe some of us have an idea, maybe some of us don't, but we'll all be able to get on the same page, let's hope, to connect, to cultivate some community here, and to ultimately promote wellness during a time where I think we're all feeling it. So with that being said, I'm gonna, one more thank you to Revolution Prep. You have been phenomenal in making the conference logistics smooth, and this is just fantastic. So thank you. a couple of housekeeping items. Be mindful of using your microphone and your camera. And when you don't want to use your microphone and your camera, please, if you look to the top of your screen, you'll see that you can use different views. Speaker view is what I would recommend. And then when in doubt, throughout this entire virtual conference experience, go to the main session access link that has been emailed to you at least a couple of times now. It is hosted on the Revolution Prep website, and that has every access link when you click on the title of the session to go directly into that Zoom meeting. So when in doubt, go there. If you lost your access link, email info@pacac.org or conferenceplanning@pacac.org. We will get you the help you need. And I just want to touch on a couple of the other sessions going on today. So after we wrap up our opening session, we will move right into our first block of educational sessions, session A. We have 8 phenomenal sessions planned. We really tried to bring some variety over the course of both of these days. We have 32 educational sessions. Huge shout out to all of our presenters and moderators. We really couldn't do this without you, so thank you. And so many of you in this room are also presenting, so thank you. And we also have, after our session A block, we have a little break. Please use that break. And at 12, at noon, we will, for those of you interested in learning more about bylaw changes for the membership meeting, we will be voting at our membership meeting at 12:30. So at 12 to 12:30, you can come and learn about those bylaw changes. And then 12:30 to 1:30, we have a full schedule, a very tight membership meeting. We will keep everything on time today. That is our goal, me and Mary and Andrea. And then after our membership meeting, we have another little break in time. We will come back together at 2 o'clock this afternoon for our B session block, another 8 sessions educational sessions offered. Another little break. And then finally, our PACAC social. I am very excited to offer 3 different options. So you will use the same session link to access the main social this afternoon. Once we get in there, we'll gather for about 15 minutes or so, and then we will break into a yoga class offered by Roots to Rise, an organization based in Philadelphia. Very excited to have them with us. And we will also offer bingo, doesn't love bingo, with some trivia thrown in there, hosted by our very own Annie Skrayback from Elizabethtown. And then we also have our happy hour. If you just want to come and chat and enjoy your beverage, you can enjoy your beverage at bingo and yoga as well. And unlimited drink tickets this year. So that is one positive. It's as many drink tickets as you'd like. So going to wrap up there. And I will be back at the end of the session to remind you of session A and the options that you have there. But we're going to be turning it over to our guest speaker, Noe Ortega, and we're very, very grateful to have you here. Noe currently serves as the Deputy Secretary and Commissioner for the Office of Post-Secondary and Higher Education at the Pennsylvania Department of Education. Prior to joining the Pennsylvania Department of Education, Noe spent 8 years at the University of Michigan, where he held several academic and administrative roles. During his tenure at UM, Noe worked as the Assistant Director and Senior Research Associate at the National Center for Institutional Diversity and as the Managing Director for the National Forum on Higher Education for the Public Good. While most of Noe's research is focused on post-secondary access and success for all students, his most recent publications examine how public investment in higher education shaped decision-making at colleges and universities. Noe spent nearly a decade working in the areas of financial aid and enrollment management at both public and private universities in Texas, and he also served as a P16 specialist for the Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board. Noe's work in education stems beyond the United States, having also spent 8 years as director of a language institute in Japan, where he trained teachers in the area of early childhood language acquisition. So welcome, Noe.
Thank you, Taylor. Can you hear me? Thank you, Taylor. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Fantastic, fantastic. If you don't mind, as I transition, I'm not sure if I can share my screen, but I'd like to do so if possible. Thank you so much. Again, I want to thank PACAC for the invitation to address the group today. I feel as if I've spent a good amount of time with a number of the professional groups that in some ways kind of mark the entry point for my career. And so it's always a pleasure to accept an invitation to address the group and to be able to provide some remarks. I did take a liberty of sort of pivoting on my presentation, given a series of events that have occurred in the last couple of weeks, to share about the state of higher education, but embedded within the face of current challenges that many of us face, right? And so COVID-19 is one of many, and I've taken the liberty to sort of reconcile my remarks within those kind of aspects. As you heard at the introduction, my name is Noe Ortega, and I am the Deputy for Higher Education. As I was preparing this morning, I did take a moment to sort of revisit the strategic plan of PACAC, right? And one of the reasons was to sort of just remind myself of the values and core principles that guide the work of many of you who joined this group, right? And I think that is, for many, is kind of what you reconcile within the mission, vision, and values of your own institutions, right? And for that, there are many. As I was looking through, I paid close attention to sort of the mission statement put out by PACAC, right? A professional group that advocates for equity, promotes access for students in post-secondary education. A mission statement that's taken on that much more importance given a series of events that have occurred in the past several weeks, right? And I don't want to shed light on the fact that these are just occurrences of the last weeks. When we think about a number of the issues and concerns embedded in what we've observed play out publicly, particularly as it relates to systemic issues and concerns about race, equity, access, et cetera, those things have certainly played out in admissions processes at colleges and universities for some time now, right? Having spent some time at the University of Michigan, the center that I worked there that was committed to institutional diversity in many ways was established as a result of some of the challenges that were being made to affirmative action by a number of students. And my work was sort of guided by carrying out those principles, both for the institution, but for a number of areas. Similarly to some of the core principles that PACAC has stated, I shed light on three, right? Advocacy, which are very pronounced. In fact, I've been invited to a number of sessions where you speak about your advocacy agenda, which is always inclusive of ideas connected to equity, as well as things that continue to promote and enhance the field, right? And establish continued legitimacy for folks that go into this profession in ways that's very much needed, and I appreciate. Equity and access always play out as important themes, and ethics and integrity, right? Which in many ways are sort of the guideposts that help us as we think about how we approach our work in professions. So what does this mean with regards to institutions of higher education and some of the challenges we face today, right? These past several months, in fact, I think we're almost at 110 days since we pivoted away from in-person interactions at our office to sort of teleworking circumstances that many of us are currently operating in. Lots of things have sort of begun to reveal themselves, right? And I think one of the things that's important to shed light is that what we've seen tremendously, and this is continuing to play out in a number of ways, is a tremendous amount of tension that you see between decisions happening at the state level and how those are being processed and applied at the institutional level, right? So I observe these on a daily basis, the same way that you live them and experience them, we experience them there at the state level as well. And we have to be very mindful of those circumstances because ultimately they're going to play out and affect the students' experiences, our experiences as we operate in these environments in the coming months, in fact, years, if you began to read a number of the things that are happening. And so there's been a tremendous amount of tension happening at the state level with institutions, but it doesn't stop there, right? You have tension also playing out at local level decisions. There's a lot of information that's out there. Often it's in tension with each other and often it's conflicting, right? I think one of the things that when I get asked what has been the most, the biggest disruption that has resulted from COVID-19 that you've been able to observe, and for me, it's been exacerbating tensions that have existed for some time, right? There's been tremendous distrust between society at large and public education. Many of them questioning its value, right? There's always been tension between bureaucracies that regulate any sector, right? And in the case of post-secondary institutions, that's coming from the state, but as well as a number of other regulatory agencies that in many ways are tied to disciplines and professions on our college campuses, right? So it's really shed light on tensions that have been there. And it's shown that there's a tremendous amount of distrust for institutions that were established to help support and elevate this, right? It's not just at post-secondary institutions. We're seeing that same narrative play out with the distrust that people have with police officers, right? We're seeing that same tension play out with distrust that folks have with a number of agencies. And this is a big concern when you consider that a lot of the work that we do as post-secondary institutions has to do with the public good outcomes that are so prevalent in post-secondary institutions. You know, commitments to a civic engagement by young students, the ways we approach leadership, all the things that move us beyond just the simple transactional aspects are really important and shed light. It's also shed light on the tremendous amount of inequities that exist in our system. Some of the challenges that we faced early on as we moved to pivot to online instruction or virtual instruction, many institutions did a commendable job with this, and we've been purposeful and intentional in saying that. But it did shed light on some inequities with regards to access, right? The pivot did not make post-secondary opportunities available to everyone. And then to deny the fact that circumstances that folks face in their own environment are not always conducive to learning and are not the kind of supportive environments that they found themselves in, especially with cohorts and folks like you who offer ongoing support to these students. All those things were missing, right? When I look over to the challenges that we faced in K through 12 education, tremendous ties to food insecurity that schools had, the role that schools have played in the life of a number of folks. And so it's going at some very core principles that COVID-19 has sort of shed light on. I want to be very responsible when I say these. These are not things that weren't there before. These were things that have always been challenged, and a number of advocacy groups have sought to address these. And it's given the shedding of light on these particular circumstances. It's given this some unfortunate, has raised unfortunate concerns, but some much needed attention on concerns that need to be addressed. This morning, as I do every morning, I open up the blogs and begin always with Inside Higher Ed. This isn't a plug. They aren't sponsoring. In fact, they weren't even listed as the sponsor, so maybe in the future they should be. But the first article I read is how this tension is now beginning to play out between society, professional associations, and institutions of higher ed. More specifically, the article spoke about rescinding admissions based on some of the things that we've seen with regards to racist postings that some of the admitted students have had. And I was very pleased by the announcement or words that were offered by President of NACAC, which embedded and shed light on the fact that equity, civility, and social responsibility are core values of the association. And this can sometimes play out in the reflection of how college admissions professionals, communities can rescind offers on admissions based on racist behavior. Now, I'm not taking a side on this argument except to say this is a very true statement. These are things that we're dealing with on a regular basis. And I think these kind of shed light on additional tensions that now face us amid all the other things happening in society that make it that much more challenging for us to approach our work. And these are all the things that are awaiting us the moment we move into more normal routine operations on our campus and in-person interactions. There's no denying that that institutions don't operate in a vacuum. So it's very, very likely that these events are going to play out on our campuses the moment that students get in there. And in some ways they're playing out because the tension directs the energy in other areas by folks, in some ways is as a response mechanism for dealing with the tremendous amount of uncertainty that currently exists in sort of the futures. And I think as I think about the profession, one of the goals that we've always had in our work is that we are the conduits for folks entering into our college campuses. For school counselors, you provide them with sort of the last minute guidance as they move into, but the handoff with admissions counselors has happened some time ago. And now we are the sort of stewards and diplomats for our institutions. And I just wanted to shed light on that tremendous challenge because I want to acknowledge the fact that it exists and it's something that we're thinking about in all the work that we're beginning to put forward. So why is it that so much tension exists? And I think for many of us, we understand that post-secondary education continues to remain a pathway to social and economic well-being, right? Health outcomes are attributed to post-secondary attainment, as well as some of the transactional that this chart sort of shed lights on what happens with post-secondary attainment. The fact that we can attribute these types of elements to it makes it even that much more contentious and creates a great deal of tension when people begin to unpack some of the issues that have been playing out with regards to admission standards, who gets in, who doesn't, and who has access, and who's being prepared to go into some of our institutions. And the more that that institution has proximity to the public sphere in terms of rankings and other things that we attributed, the more we see those kind of tensions begin to play out. And I think it's important to understand why. But I also want to shed light on the fact that access remains and continues to remain inequitable. The chances of folks being able to persist, complete post-secondary education vary among populations of color, right? We see that among Black and Latino students as well have lower attainment rates than some of our white counterparts. And so these are things that all of us deal with on a regular basis. Now, this is not just exclusive to the admissions process. This is a comprehensive concern that's spread across all the services and areas of the post-secondary institution, but continue to be sort of the framing that we use and how we're thinking about our work. In Pennsylvania, enrollment at our post-secondary institutions has fallen more than 9% since 2010. We don't know what the impacts are going to be post-COVID-19, but lots of the indicators show that there's going to be challenges. There's going to be challenges that are not because opportunities don't exist. It's going to be challenges because people are questioning and second guessing their own well-being and safety if they make a decision to enroll on a college campus in the fall semester. And I know many of you are working to address what those options are going to be for students in your work. When we think about the number of students who graduate from high school and enroll, 6 in 10 Pennsylvania high school graduates go on to a post-secondary education. The concern there is only half of those students, 3 of 6, will complete their degree or credential within 6 years, right? This is not to say that 6 years should be the only standard out there. If you begin to open that bandwidth, there are other folks, particularly more non-traditional students who are enrolling on our campus who take a few extra years, some who face circumstances, but it still does create a challenge that our completion rates are not as great as they should be, right? And so I just want to shed light because these are the ways that we begin to think about the framing of the problem. How many Pennsylvanians hold a post-secondary certificate? According to the Lumina Foundation's report, only 46%. In fact, that probably has gone up by maybe 0.5, if not 0.7 of a point, but it's still below 50%, right? And so less than half of post-secondary certificates are held by Pennsylvania, which is a big concern in the state's work. And then when we unpack that between populations of color, 28% of Pennsylvanians who are Black hold a post-secondary certificate or credential, right? Shedding light on the inequities. And then when you look at Latino Brown students in Pennsylvania, 23% of them hold a post-secondary certificate or credential. So the inequities are big, and they were big before we even entered the environment that we currently find ourselves in. And they are certainly challenges that the state has elected to take on head on and then work with our various partners to begin to address. 60% of the populations aged 20 to 64 who hold a post-secondary degree or credential in Pennsylvania, our goal is to increase that by 2025. And we want to begin to focus on what this means for closing the attainment gaps of historically underrepresented students, right? A very important aspect of our post-secondary attainment goal and something that we're very proud to sort of begin shed light on. All this has to do with the fact that we've got folks who are leading up the Department of Education who have made it unapologetically a commitment for us to focus on these inequities and begin to address them. And I think this kind of works nicely with the missions that many of our student services groups have already put out there as values of their field. I think the one thing that's interesting coming out of the enrollment management student service areas is that we've always professed as a commitment in our work to serving students and making sure that they can transition and be successful. And so now more than ever, I think groups like this need to have a seat at the table to inform the decisions being made by institutional leaders in every sense of the decisions as we think about what the post-secondary experience looks like post-COVID. So what I wanted to share with you was sort of the plan for resiliency for higher education that the state has put out recently, right? Which is going to affect the decisions that many of you are going to make as you look into it. But I wanted to begin by shedding light on some guideposts that inform the plan, right? This was developed with the health and safety of students, staff, faculty in mind, right? For me, this is a very interesting pivot in my work. My work has always been about thinking about equity and values and guiding people into post-secondary success. And now I'm being challenged to think about, well, what are the health and safety aspects of this that move beyond some of the things that were always pronounced in our work, like mental health and well-being. These are safety that have life and death consequences, which is a real challenge. But it was put out there with that sort of challenge in mind. It also acknowledges that there's so much diversity in the institutions of Pennsylvania, that the only way to really come up with an approach is to allow for institutional-led response teams to plan their own pathway forward. And then it acknowledges in a very important way that there's interconnectedness of learning with the various services, operation, and activities that occur on campus, right? This is not just a decision about offering in-person instruction on college campuses, which is technically how it's been framed in a number of ways. This is about all the aspects of the university tied to instruction that are equally important, right? From the folks who are bringing in people into the campus to those who are serving them in sort of co-curricular, even extracurricular activities. And so these are all important things to begin to acknowledge. And ultimately it's informed by stakeholder input, right? Which I think are really important things. And then we've made a decision in Pennsylvania, and you've seen these play across in different ways from a number of states, that we're going to resume in-person instruction as early as yellow, right? But we're going to do so responsibly. And we're going to also acknowledge that things can change. We're seeing it change already. We can move back from green to, let's say, yellow or red. But our decisions moving forward are going to look very different, because in some ways we've already begun to engage institutional leaders such as yourself in framing and putting plans in place of how this would work. So briefly, let me shed light on how these phases will work, and then it sort of begins to shed light on some of the questions that you're going to begin to answer as you are engaged in health and safety planning in your institution. The red phase, which is the most restrictive phase that we've been in Pennsylvania, as you know, required teleworking for many staff. Virtual only instruction was the only modality permitted at post-secondary institutions. However, for some of you who are already assigned as essential and critical personnel, you're aware that there is offerings happening in red at some of our institutions, particularly as it relates to clinical training of people who are in programs like nurse, allied health professions, medical schools as well. And then there are also some workforce development programs that have been put in place tied to high need, life-sustaining careers that we need to make sure we don't disrupt in terms of their pipeline, right? And then other things that are obvious in the phases that we have here during the COVID-19 is that gatherings on social, there are restrictions on social gatherings in Pennsylvania, and they're the most restrictive in the red phase. As you look to what we introduced in the reopening plan that was released at the beginning of the month on June 3rd, we are now going to move into a yellow phase. And for many of you, you've already even pivoted to a green phase, where you will begin to move towards limited in-person instruction that adheres to some of the social distancing and physical distancing guidelines. The idea of what limited is going to mean on your campus is decided by your institutional teams that are going to think about what reconfiguring the campus with these guidelines and principles in mind looks like. And this will determine how many students will be coming in. I imagine, as I've already heard, a number of institutions will be doing hybrid type of approaches where there'll still be some opportunities for students to learn virtually if they choose to, but there's still the challenges of having to address where virtual instruction is not an option, how you're going to approach in putting those processes in place, right? And then gatherings continue to be restricted in the yellow phase. I think one thing that's very interesting about the Pennsylvania plan is that it does make a distinction between non-curricular special events and curricular gatherings on your campus. And by that, I mean your instruction in your classroom is something that we don't consider a non-curricular social gathering. So it was going to be dictated by decisions that you make on campus, right? Some of you are at institutions that have the opportunity to repurpose facilities. And in doing so, you can bring in student groups that are larger than 25, for example, and still maintain control in the environment that ensures safety. Others may choose that less than 25 might be the approach that you take on your campus. And so those things for our guidance is what we put in the hands of the institutions. What remains certain throughout is that institutions are expected to adhere to guidance coming out from the Center for Disease Control and Prevention, the Department of Health, and then from time to time, the Department of Education, which will mostly release guidance as it pertains to troubleshooting some of the regulatory challenges that you may face in putting things in place. So we continue to work with our partners in doing so. The green phase is an extension of what you're seeing in yellow, and it moves more towards normal operations in ways that are beneficial. So this in some ways are the guidance that's going out to the field that's going to inform some of the decisions that you're making. Schools are required to sort of assess their level of preparedness to go into this, but also to think about what the best approach to offering instruction for students is going to be, ensuring some of the safety. So I want to pause there, Taylor, Mary, to see if there are any questions that have popped up in the chat that may be worthwhile to address. And I want to be really mindful of what you said at the beginning. Your goal today is to stay on track and time so you can proceed through all the great information you've created with the program, and I want to be respectful of that.
Thank you so much. I don't see any questions in the chat at the moment. If anyone has questions, we have a couple more minutes. Please add your question to the chat button at the bottom.
If there aren't, I'm happy to skip to the end and address some of the strategies that we sort of put in place that I think are important for us to shed light on. And I think this will be good to help folks. Much of what we've been doing in the field around our strategies connected to improving post-secondary entertainment kind of fall into these kind of primary buckets, right? We're leveraging networks such as working closer with PACAC and other groups. We're thinking about affordability and what that's going to look like. We're thinking about financial literacy and how that informs the decisions that folks are making in terms of approaching post-secondary opportunities. And we're thinking about quality assurance, right? Any pivot that you do into making colleges and universities more affordable and accessible should not come at the expense of the quality and form of education that students receive. And then here's some examples of the areas where we've begun to move into, right? Affordability, financial literacy. Many of you know that this year we'll be releasing information from your financial aid offices at your institutions to inform students about their borrowing behavior to date. And then we need to offset that with some literacy around what that means for the decisions that they're making. Post-secondary guidance and planning continues to be an important element, right? From time to time, we engage in discussions about student to counselor ratios, which are troubling in many of our institutions, and we need to continue to think about how we address those, either through practice, which is the most accessible, through education of our leaders to understand why that's such an important, and then ultimately, if we had to move in the direction that folks like Ramit from California have done, which is they've legislated the idea of student counselor to student ratios. Quality assurance is always important, leveraging the networks. Transitions in terms of making sure that students can transfer across our post-secondary sectors. I'm very pleased, Taylor, that as you opened, and Mary as well, you shed light on the importance of mental health and well-being. That's never become such an important when we think about some of the societal tensions currently playing out, as well as the disruptions of COVID-19, and this is going to really elevate that. And then student health and safety, which have just really taken on a new format in our campuses, are all really important. Here are some examples of the way those policy areas are framed in some of the work. Some of them connect directly to your work, others are more indirectly. But we can continue to look at what the state grant is going to do in affordability, how loan summary notifications are going to work well to help achieve the outcomes that they intended, the student to counselor ratio, which I mentioned, but also thinking about social workers, transfer and articulation, counselor symposia to continue to work with our counseling groups in terms of development, professional development and guidance as they carry out many of the work that we have, and then ultimately thinking about what COVID-19 guidelines and relief funds will look like as we begin to try to infuse and create some stimulus that could assist institutions in achieving the resiliency that many of them deserve to enjoy and need to continue to enjoy. So that sort of frames my remarks, Taylor and Mary, for some of the things that I wanted to share. I hope it serves as sort of guidance for some of the conversations that'll play out throughout the day. Secretary Rivera was very clear to all of us when we were approaching this work that we would approach it with sort of an equity mindset. And I think it's important for me to use these opportunities as I speak and address to folks to not lose sight of the fact that that kind of continues to remain the North Star of a lot of the work that we do. And we begin to frame all our efforts into that, understanding that there is a plethora of items that need to be addressed on our college campuses. I'll see there if anything emerged in terms of questions in the chat or others.
We do have a couple. Yeah, we received a couple of questions we want to take a minute to answer if you would do us the pleasure. The first question is that we seem to focus on college, but what about the trade and technical fields that need trained professionals?
Sure, I think that's a really important concept. So a lot of the work that we've been doing in the Department of Education is really being mindful of the fact that post-secondary opportunities for students need to be something that, first of all, they begin to think about and curate on their own based on the direction that they want to take. And for many folks, that does mean the idea of moving into post-secondary pathways that are different from a credential that you receive at a 2 or 4 year institution, right? And I think that's completely applicable. But I want to also be mindful of the fact that when we talk about post-secondary pathways, we should begin with emphasizing the fact that everyone should have the opportunity to go on the pathway that's going to be the sort of the 4 year pathway if they wanted to go that direction, or the 2 year pathway, and make sure that they know and understand they have that choice first before they decide to go on other ways, which I think is really important. So a lot of the times when we're talking about this, we begin to frame them that way, but I don't want to take away from the fact that we understand that the pathways we curate are very different. A lot of the work that we have been doing the past couple of years with the Counselor Symposia has really been focused on career and technical preparation and workforce development. In fact, most of the symposia, if you attended them as a school counselor, you would know that it was all around the guidance tied to sort of career pathways. So in many ways, that was the work that we wanted to focus on the first phase. And now we're moving into broadening that scope to think about 4 or 2 year guidance as well.
Great. And we do actually, I think we are out of time now, but we did receive a handful of phenomenal questions in the chat that Mary and I will be sharing with you after, if you wouldn't mind, and then we'll share with our membership. But thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Taylor. Thank you, Mary, for the opportunity. And I look forward to the next time we interact. Enjoy all.
Great, thank you. And we are going to transition over. We have an award to present. So the Gary M. Kelsey Human Relations Award, it's awarded to an organization, school, or college counselor who makes outstanding and voluntary contributions for the betterment of community and students, particularly those to advance the human dignity of minorities and the disadvantaged. So I'd like to welcome our nominator.
Hi, can you see me? Hello?
Yes, we can see you.
Okay. This is Mike Phillips. I'm the director of the Penn State Admissions Office at Penn State here in Pittsburgh. I'd like to congratulate Miss Rachel J. Banks. What I said about her was this. Since Rachel has been the assistant director at the Penn State Admissions Office in Pittsburgh, she's been here for 3 years, but she's been with Penn State for 6 years. But she has taken on the role to recruit all students in the city of Pittsburgh and the surrounding areas, in particular, students of color. And there has been many Saturdays that she has given up her time to coordinate SAT, financial aid, and essay writing workshops. She has also spent many evenings organizing and participating in the many Penn State bus trips to our campuses. Rachel will even go as far as to meet students and parents in their home. Maybe not now because of the virus, but just to help the students successfully understand the admissions process. I believe it's important to state that she is willing to help a student attend any school, anywhere, and that she truly believes in helping that student find that right fit. Besides work, Rachel has contributed to the community by sitting on the board of directors for the Crossroad Foundation, which is an organization that provides promising youth who have limited options and access to a quality Catholic high school education. And she also she was the co-chair for this year's Pennsylvania Black Conference on Higher Education. As a matter of fact, she even won the Western Regional Award for that. And she is now the new Pennsylvania Black Conference on Higher Education Western Regional Director. She has also formed a relationship with the Urban League of Greater Pittsburgh Education Department, working with their students to aspire them toward higher education. And in addition, she is becoming to be a great advocate speaker and presenter for at-risk youth as they aspire to higher education. As a matter of fact, she did a presentation for PACAC last year. So I can go on and on. However, I was only given so much time to speak. So I'd like to congratulate Rachel Banks for this year's Gary M. Kelsey Humanitarian Award. Thank you very much. Congratulations, Rachel.
Yes, thank you for that nomination, and congratulations, Rachel. This chat has exploded with comments and congratulations. We are such a supportive organization. This is phenomenal. So that's well earned. So we are just running out of time at the moment. I want to share just this screen of the Session A offerings. So reminder to go back to the Revolution Prep access link that was emailed to you, which is how you access this session, to select which of these 8 sessions you'd like to head on to next. I thank all of the presenters who are getting into those sessions now, and you will be admitted right around 10 a.m. into each of those sessions. If you have questions, technical difficulties, we will do our best to help you. Please email conferenceplanning@pacac.org or info@pacac.org, and we will see you in Session A. Thank you, everyone.